Hi everyone. Today let's talk about the debt ceiling again. Then we'll talk PayPal earnings and Airbnb. Then we'll go over the economic calendar and get into the charts. Then we'll finish up with my results for the day and my thoughts going into tomorrow's session. Don't forget to check out the Patreon and the Twitter linked in the description. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. Starting off with the debt ceiling here, we've talked about this multiple times before, but let's talk about it since it's coming up here. The current date is 1 June, where the government could run out of money, and currently the White House and House Republicans have not come to a consensus on what's going to pass. The White House wants no stipulations, and they just want to continue to spend despite inflation and despite hitting the debt limit once again. And House Republicans are asking for some concessions on spending in order to raise the debt limit $1.5 trillion, and currently they cannot come to an agreement. Of course, if they do not come to an agreement, it will be catastrophic for everyone. And it's worth mentioning that the debt limit has been raised 78 times since 1960, and it was instituted in 1917. They raised it most recently in December of 21 by $2.5 trillion, capping the debt at $31.38 trillion. And in terms of what could happen if we did default, current analysts expect that we see a drop in GDP by 4%, 7 million workers lose their jobs, and even a brief default would cause 2 million jobs to be lost. On top of that, we would definitely be out-leveraged by China and Russia, who are not having the same debt issues, and it could even further jeopardize our position as the world reserve currency. And then looking at the bills to be paid, you can see $50 billion here in Social Security, $20 billion in Medicaid, $12 billion in veteran benefits, and $6 billion for federal salaries, and then $1 billion in SNAP. Janet Yellen came out and said there are no good options and that every option is a bad option, and that there is no solution besides raising the debt limit and making sure that people understand that America pays its bills. The question here is, are we really paying our bills if we're just borrowing more money to pay our bills? Not really. That would be like taking money out on your credit card to be able to make your monthly minimum payments. It's definitely not a sustainable method. It's not quite the same as that because, in theory, the Fed can print money and the government can borrow that money. So it's not quite the same as an individual doing what I just said, but it is fairly similar in premise. And lastly, here they go over the Republican position. Basically, they want to cut spending in exchange for raising the debt limit. And the White House wants no stipulations. They just want to raise the debt limit and then talk about it after the fact. We've gone over their positions more in depth before, so we're not going to cover it again here, but that's the basic premise. Moving over to PayPal earnings, they did well, but their margins fell and the stock is falling. You can see the stock was down more than 12%. But when you look at earnings per share, it was 70 cents compared with 43 cents from a year ago, so it's still growing. And revenue rose to $7.04 billion from $6.48 billion. So top and bottom lines continue to grow here. But like I said, they disappointed on margin, and they said they're going to focus on improving margin and the structure of their business. Moving over to Airbnb, they dropped 10% on earnings as they offered a cautious outlook for the rest of the year. They did swing a net profit of $117 million after losing $19 million a year before, which is their first ever profitable quarter. And you can see here their earnings per share was actually double, so 18 cents versus 9 cents. And they beat on the top line here by a little bit as well, so their margins must be doing better than expectations. But even with that pretty extensive beat on EPS, they fell as much as 10% in after-hours trading, and they say their total revenue rose by 20% year over year, which allowed for that profit. They had a strong start to the year, but they did mention that Q2 of 2022 will be a tough comparison for them. Of course, they had to mention AI and how they're going to use that to improve their platform, but overall, things seem to be improving here for Airbnb. Moving over to the economic calendar, in case you forgot, CPI, headline, and core are tomorrow at 8:30 Eastern. Expectations 0.4% for month over month, 5.5% here for core, so slight step down. Headline 5%, not expected to move. And then month over month actually stepping up from 0.1 to 0.4. So we'll see how all that plays out. This will have a big impact on Fed futures. If these numbers come in hot, that could certainly start to price out the cuts that the market is expecting at the end of the year. And obviously, if there is inflation, there will be no cuts. Moving over to the charts, starting with the S&Ps on the 15-minute and the 4-hour, you can see we basically gapped down, Really, we fell in the pre-market pretty fast, and then we were down around this 411 area, and then we chopped in that zone sideways, very similar to what we did yesterday. Just sideways chop after that move down. We're still sitting right above the 200 SMA on the 15-minute chart. Looking at the 4-hour here, we're just above the 55, but we are below the 9 as well as VWAP, so still neutral here, just below that area of highest volume on the 4-hour chart, but still above my 410.54 level. We'll see how this plays out, but right now this is a lower high going into CPI, and of course CPI is going to dictate direction. And it's also worth noting how much selling there was here at the end of the day, people exiting their positions because they don't want to be subjected to that morning report. We'll see what comes out of that, and that'll give us some clear direction tomorrow, in my opinion. Moving over to the NASDAQ, similar thesis, gap down, although this did kind of slide downwards throughout the day. Very slowly, not a big move down. And then looking at the 4-hour here, you can see this most recent high after that gap through that trend line is still a slightly higher high versus this previous one. So we still have a higher high. If this comes down, you would expect a higher low at trend support, sitting around that 318.55 level. We also have 319.60 that I continue to watch. We're now below my 321.82 level. We're retesting that here after hours. See how that plays out. But overall, I would expect this to continue lower and potentially set up a higher low versus this low on 4 May. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, pretty different thesis here. You can see the Russell actually went higher. You can see the Russell was actually fairly bullish on the day after the gap down. So we threw a wick to the 21 EMA on the 4-hour, got above the trend line, retesting the 9 and 55 EMAs as well as VWAP here. We're also above the area of highest volume. This gets above 174.38. That could be fairly bullish. RSI starting to trend higher a little bit. Definitely interesting. Dow still at this range, still at a key resistance, still below the 55 EMA. Not a lot of movement on the Dow, and it's down just a little bit overall. As you would expect, Apple and Tesla moved down here today, so we had a bit of a top, we had a pullback, still above my 170.90 level, but it is pulling back here, looking at the 21 EMA at 170.46 as well. Certainly could pull back into that zone tomorrow. Momentum turning bearish here, RSI below the SMA. Looking at Tesla on the 12-hour, you can see that rally that we had. Ended up throwing a wick and pulling back here today, back down to the 9 EMA as well as VWAP. We're also slightly below the 200 there as well. So I would expect this to pull back, probably retest the 9 EMA, and then we'll see what happens from there. If this 167.34 level continues to hold, might see another test of that and then a push back up to 177.70. Momentum starting to turn a little bit bearish here. RSI still above the 50 level, but it is moving lower back down to the SMA, potentially for a retest or a cross through this 50 line, which could be bearish. Moving over to Snowflake and Palantir, these continue to be on a run here. Snowflake making higher highs. Palantir did pull back a little bit, did retest these highs, but then finished very close to its highs for today. Both of these look pretty bullish. Lots of volume here today as well. Snowflake getting overbought on the 12-hour, so might see a little bit of a pullback, but this is still on a run, and it can run pretty far here on Snowflake. So overall bullish on both of these continuing into tomorrow's session. Of course, be cognizant of CPI. Moving over to staples and discretionary, you can see staples pulling back here again. Did not get up to my 77.50 level. I continue to think this is probably the end of this run until we see a bigger pullback down to the 55 EMA or 75.40. Discretionary pulled back a little bit, still in my zone of resistance here. Honestly, has lasted quite a bit longer than I thought it would, but we're still in this zone. We continue to break down every time we get into it. And I think we might see a pretty big reaction here on discretionary based on the inflation data tomorrow. Moving over to stocks above their 50 and 200-day average here, you can see the 50-day average stepped down quite a bit after basically retesting that SMA here on RSI. Does look like this is going to head lower. 200-day, on the other hand, gap down, rallied here a little bit, not showing us much, still in this zone that we've been in for the last 5 days. Moving over to the dollar here on the hourly and the daily, you can see we ended up getting a continuation of that double bottom formation, took out this previous high, and then pulled back here a little bit. Still intact on the shorter term rally on the hourly chart. Momentum is fading here. RSI dipped below the SMA, retesting that here, and it does look like it's starting to move lower now. So it might see a little bit bigger pullback. This is kind of setting up as a high, lower high as well, so keep an eye on that. Daily chart, however, showing bullishness, RSI crossing above the SMA. If this crosses the 50 line and holds, we might see a little bit bigger rally. That would be interesting. But like I said, in the short term, probably going to get at least a little bit of a pullback. Moving over to JNK and TLT, you can see JNK moved down quite a bit here today, retested the 200 SMA on the 12-hour chart. Bearish momentum, bearish RSI. If this starts to continue lower, getting through that 91 level down to 89, it's going to be pretty significant. Looking at TLT, continues to go lower, retesting these previous lows. We did throw a big wick up through 103.70, but then got rejected, so 102.50 to the downside is my expectation. Moving over to the VIX on the hour and the daily, you can see this trend line continues to hold. So we established it here on Friday, retested it on Monday, retested it again here today, and we're rallying into the close. Daily chart, not showing us a whole lot of anything, just continuing to hold this trend, looking to get above 1850 and then push back up to retest these trend lines here at 20 on the VIX. Moving over to my accounts here, you can see I made a little bit of money, which is good. Made all the money back from last time, plus a little bit, so everything's good there. All my positions worked out. I did end up holding this 318 and 327 put and call into tomorrow's session. Basically, I just forgot about those. I meant to take them off at the end of the day, but I got caught up in work and I just didn't do it, which is upsetting. But otherwise, good to see 99,000 broke that level. We'll see if that holds going into tomorrow's session. At this point, I do expect prices to go lower. I am bearish, neutral to bearish, leaning towards bearish in tomorrow's session. Of course, CPI will tell us where we're going, but that is my thesis right now. And honestly, I'm a little concerned about this 318 put going into tomorrow's session. Let me know down in the comments section what you think of the default risk. Is the United States actually going to default on 1 June? That would be pretty catastrophic for the world. And then if you have any thoughts on PayPal or Airbnb, put those down in the comments as well. Otherwise, like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video. Make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.